Okay, hello everyone. I think we are live on stream. If the chat could let me know if you can hear me correctly, and then I'll bring the guest on and we'll make sure the levels are all equal and whatnot. Let me just make sure. I've done this enough where you'd think that I would know, I would, but I never trust YouTube live streaming. So as long as the chat can hear me, and then once they can, I'll bring on the guest. We'll make sure the levels are equal, and then we'll be good. Let's see. Now, so, yeah, it's kind of a delay. Okay, so it looks like my audio is good. All right, so I'm going to bring the guest on right now, let him introduce himself, and then we'll get to it. Just a moment. Okay, my man, if you're ready, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, who, me?
Yes.
You could call me Arthur, I guess. It's not my real name, but that's what I'm using right now. Sure.
All right, perfect. So Arthur, welcome to the channel. So we kind of got in contact via the comment section of my video in regard to the reject modernity, embrace masculinity videos. I kind of leveled a criticism at sort of like the trend and sort of like the larger issues I have with it. And then you commented sort of giving an alternate opinion. Particularly, we were discussing sort of I kind of put in the title the merits of male aggression. I don't know if like exactly, but sort of like just sort of male aggression and how it manifests itself, and how there can be pros and cons to that. How one side sort of really sort of emphasizes it, like yes, aggression is good, it's inherent in masculinity and it should be embraced, while the other side's like no, male aggression is like really bad. It's toxic masculinity. It's not good. It should be controlled and stamped out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess to start off, why don't you give your view of male aggression, and you can kind of like, just do your own thing. Sort of like male aggression, how it relates to the trend of video, or just generally in society.
Uh, I mean, I think it's an intrinsic part of men and masculinity. I mean, it's literally always been there. You can't remove it. You can't change it. Trying to do so would be idiotic. You know, it would be. I don't know. It's like it's like trying to turn a fucking lion into a vegan, right? It's not going to happen. So you could look at it from a societal, larger, big picture kind of point of view, right? You could say part of a healthy society is to contain male aggression, right? You have to create activities. Sports would be obviously a big one, in order to try to keep men from getting over aggressive. And, policing is about largely policing over aggressive men in society. Like, that's pretty obvious. So sure, yeah, there's elements where you do have to contain it. You do have to limit male aggression. But it's also a fact of life, that we have to deal with, and that there is a point where trying to contain it gets to be too much, and all you end up doing is adding to the problem. Because, as with most problems, when it comes to, I guess, fundamental human features that have negative aspects or can become negative, once you suppress them too much, you just, you don't solve the problem. You just let it boil under the surface until it explodes. It becomes a bigger problem. You don't have that you haven't created any kind of good, reasonable measure to handle, and it becomes, dangerous, actually dangerous.
Gotcha. And just to make clear, so given our conversation, you would say that my video criticizing the reject modernity, embrace masculinity trend of videos was in a sense trying to police said male aggressive
To a
behavior.
degree, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
To in a I can tell. I watched. I did a little. I hadn't really seen much of your stuff when I'd seen that video and comment on it. I had seen like, I think I was introduced to you like 2 weeks ago, actually. Um, it was the James Bond videos you did. So I had seen like those and the Watchmen video and the Dear Evan Hansen, that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then that one popped up and it was like 10 minutes. I was like, fuck it, why not? And, so I didn't really see much of your stuff. And then I saw like the one, your little epic one about like dating and MRAs and all that crap, right? So I didn't know you had like more on this topic.
Yeah, mostly the most channel's mostly like storytelling analysis, writing analysis, but occasionally I'll dip into men's issues. I did the dating video, which is like red pill, MRA, incel, all that stuff, and then I did one on celebrity body transformations and how that kind of it can kind of perpetuate body dysmorphia in men, especially celebrity influencers. People who like push out their I worked out 12 hours a day for 87 weeks, something like ridiculous. And then like young guys try to do the plan, they get burnt out, and then they don't see results.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. That's a very good point about unrealistic expectations. That's fine. I don't really disagree with any of that stuff. But it's also kind of like with the male dating video. You did a lot. You came at it in a nuanced way, and I appreciated that. A lot of people do. There's an extremely hostile cultural media atmosphere when it comes to men and men's issues. And I appreciate that you're trying to come at these things with a nuanced take. But I think the thing is that in the last one it was, this is cringe, don't do this, and I can completely understand that. But you're also kind of like saying that if dudes make fun of other dudes for doing things that they deem as unmasculine or non-masculine, they shouldn't be doing that. You don't need to attack. And it's like, that's gonna happen. I mean, there's no way of not letting that happen. And I don't necessarily. It's not necessarily a bad impulse on your part to want to protect others, essentially, but I do see it as futile. Essentially, you're not gonna accomplish anything, and what you're gonna end up doing is adding yourself to that chorus of ultimate negativity. You're gonna join the people who talk about how all men are rapists or whatnot. Not very loudly. You're not on their side necessarily, but when viewed by guys who are already feeling the pressure from that kind of group, that kind of cultural side of things, that's where you're going to end up. You're just going to become the them to their us, right? And that seems to me like that becomes part of the problem.
So you don't necessarily disagree with my outlook on it. It's more the trying to make an effort. Like you sort of agree with what I'm saying, but the way I'm going about, or even just trying to put that out there, instead of helping guys, it more likely will just cause further division, or more like what's the term, polarization.
Yeah, it's going to add more to the problem. It's and yes, largely I agree. I do think there's maybe if we get into more of the, I don't know, philosophical heart of the question of like how much male aggression is good or bad, etc. I have the feeling you're probably going to be more. It seems like you're a little more, or like I said, I think you're more sensitive on that kind of the aspect of it, and I'm probably less so, and that I think it's probably far more permissible.
So, and again, like I think it really depends on. It's not necessarily male aggression I have a problem with. It's the issue on other, like sort of like male insecurity, or male sort of like lashing out, sort of being sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, being sort of concealed as a demonstration of male aggression. So, for example, in this case, like you mentioned, like, hey, trying to stop guys from telling other men their behavior isn't manly. So like, just as an example, would you say that like me calling someone out for saying, "Hey, if you are gay, if you like other dudes or like kiss other dudes, that's not manly."
Well, I mean, you're dealing with two basic big issues there, I guess. Um, or maybe there's different perspectives on that, right? There's
Yeah, but not all are. But I mean, you would agree not all are equally as valid.
I don't know. I mean, I guess it would depend on what the issue is. Like, look, you could say stuff like a good counter to that would always be what like the Greeks were super homoerotic, right? They were like super gay. They had a
Well, you
whole
don't. Well, you don't even have to go that far. I'm simply saying that why would you define why is masculinity defined by someone's sexuality? Whether a man is straight or gay, why does that factor into whether or not he is considered a man or masculine or manly?
well, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that plenty of gay dudes are hyper masculine, in fact, and I know that, right? Like I was a theater kid in high school. I had a lot of gay friends, um, and they were, some of them, not all of them. Some of them were very effeminate, but some of them were pretty masculine guys, and that's part of their whole appeal. But there is also a thing with lots of straight guys, something that they can't really say it because they know it's going to get them kind of lambasted in the current cultural zeitgeist, that they honestly feel genuinely disgusted on a very primal level when they see two dudes kissing. People will say that's not right of them to think, it's not right of them to feel that, and maybe they even think it themselves. They know it's not how they should feel, but it's visceral. It's very primal. It's very much like that reads as wrong in their heads, and it kind of makes them feel a little queasy. Like I said, I had a bunch of gay friends, and I remember a conversation I had with one of them. This was back in high school, and he was saying, "Well, we feel the same way when we watch straight people kiss," and it was like, "Huh?" And I mean, and it was like, "Fine, I get it. Like, there's dudes who feel this way, and they kind of see it that way, but it goes the other way too." And I accept that that's probably how it goes in both ways. Um, but and it just becomes like, well, what are you really policing here? Are you policing someone's visceral, deep-seated, like physical reaction to something, or are you policing their behavior? If you're talking about behavior, I can completely see that, right? Don't beat up gay kids, fine, completely 100% there, down with you. But if you're saying, you can't, make a snide remark about this because that's how someone decides to, you know, express their disgust, you're not helping, because that's just going to be suppression of deep, primal reactions to things.
But in that case, isn't me not saying something allowing that person's expression of disgust to have effects on the outside world? So, for example, if a person grows up in sort of like an area, say like a really like regressive Bible Belt area, and they are raised in sort of like in a community where homosexuality is seen as something very disgusting or unnatural or degenerate. So if that kid grows up to say he's in his teens or 20s, his disgust for gay people may not be quote unquote his fault, in the sense that if you're like, not to defend it, but if you're raised for your entire adolescent life with that constantly reaffirmed, constantly sort of like reinforced, I wouldn't be surprised if a person had that sort of outlook when they entered adulthood. The problem, though, then, is when that person, so they have that feeling towards gay people, but then when they start putting those thoughts in, or sort of like that, their disgust, and expressing it into the world, well, that can have very real and tangible negative effects on society in general, gay people. So in that case, I'm not necessarily saying like, hey, you're a bad person because you feel this way. Because again, like, I mean, it's hard. Obviously, it's hard to say that, because it's like, well, to have that nuance. But like, yeah, look, if you were raised in an area where this was sort of the norm, where like homosexuality was sort of put down and seen as disgusting, I understand why you feel that way. But as an adult, you are responsible for your actions. So by you going
Sure.
out and saying stuff like, "Hey, gays are disgusting," or like you kind of you see two guys kissing and you go like, "Ew," or something like that. That isn't like, I understand you have that primal. A guy might have. I don't think it's primal. I think it's nurture. I don't think it's just inherent in every man. Um, that results, or I would criticize that guy by saying, hey, look, if you have these feelings, like, I mean, at the very least, can you keep them to yourself so you don't cause harm to others? So it kind of seems like,
Okay, hold on though. But you said, how are we're not, like I said, we're not talking about physical behavior here. We're not talking about beating people up or rolling up in a pickup truck and dragging some kid. We're talking about jokes and or snide and maybe even hurtful jokes. We're talking about insults. We're talking about words and expressions of emotions. Now, you did a whole bit. I forget which video it was because I watched a few of them to try to get more of a sense of your vibe, I guess. And one of them, you maybe it was the dating one. I can't remember, but it was you made a whole bit about the video game violence arguments that politicians used to say, and you had all these people screaming about, well, if they practice all this violence in video games, it's going to lead to aggression. It's going to lead to more violence in reality. But it doesn't. And it really, really doesn't. And in fact, if anything, what we're seeing is that when it comes to behavior, having outlets to, express this violent emotion in video games virtually in an environment where it actually causes no real harm other than that you might not get off the couch, you might not burn some calories that you really should. It's actually maybe linking to a lower expression of violence. So in an
so,
online space where a dude is
so just
maybe
to, so sorry, just to understand, just to kind of connect these two, and I'm sorry if I'm saying this incorrectly, you can correct me. You're
sure.
saying we should allow men to, you know, like make hurtful jokes towards gay guys because otherwise it might lead to those men becoming violent.
No, what I'm saying is that basically that look, anyone can allow or disallow anything they want on their platform, and they can make their own policy rules, and you can kick that stuff off of YouTube. Making a sort of general blanket statement, what or individual, basically places that control this can limit that conversation if they choose, right? But fundamentally, expressions of this kind are they're gonna happen anyway. Uh, and A and B,
But doesn't
trying to restrict them probably is not going it doesn't. I don't really see how it's going to necessarily lead to actual harm. I don't really see how it's necessarily going to be like a big leap in terms of how you're causing damage here. It just doesn't seem like it hurts
so
in
so
a
just
real
to
way.
just as like an example, if a gay couple's walking down the street and they like are holding hands, and a guy passes and he turns around and goes, "Haha, queers," you can't see how that might cause harm to those two gay guys.
No, not really, because it's words.
Well, yeah, but if we look at like vast amount of studies, we see that LGBTQ people are, when they're raised in a society that is basically reinforcing this idea that you know who they love is them loving another person of the same sex is wrong. It can have drastic mental effects on them.
Yeah, well, I mean, so can calling someone fat when they're fat. Someone can call, you can call
Yeah,
anyone a number of names, man. Like
yeah,
it can just get
and
mean
what
and cruel. Yeah.
yeah, and what we're saying is simply like, hey, just because we're all humans here and we have sort of like a general level of decency, maybe just try not to do that.
Sure. Yeah, and you can say that, and that's going to happen. With some people, will respond well to that, and they'll curb their tendency to do that. But with others, it's not going to have any effect, and those are the ones who are going to see you're kind of telling them not to do stuff as a restriction on them, and then they're the ones who are going to double down, get a lot worse.
Yeah, but in that case, isn't that on them? If I tell someone, it's like, hey, can you not call like that those gay guys queer because like it's not very nice, and they get upset by saying, well, I don't like you policing my behavior, and they go out and they like start like being like twice as homophobic as before as like a protest, isn't it like, shouldn't the criticism be aimed at that person for not having the sort of maturity or like the sense of being like that's sort of like, in my view, masculinity is about, like helping your fellow man, not putting them on down for their own ego or for their own, self, like what's gradulation, flagellation,
Flagellate.
self flagellation, yeah. So it kind of seems like you're putting the onus on. So like in this scenario, two gay guys walking on the street, guy goes, haha, queer, and I go, hey, can you not do that? And then you enter the situation, and then instead of telling that person, it's like, yeah, man, can you not do that? That's not really nice. Can you like find another way to, expel your aggression? You're getting mad at me for saying, hey, man, you shouldn't police his behavior. Like, do you guys see the weird situation there?
I can see where you're coming from in that. And like I kind of said at the end of my comment originally, that, maybe this isn't my place to kind of intercede or inject my opinion. I didn't mean it like that. Originally, when I was kind of putting my comment, it was more about, I think, the whole thing of like, that a lot of the things that you showed as demonstrations in your video, I did see ways in which what you defined as non-masculine behavior that you said were bad were demonstrable in the kind of clips you showed of what was being used as the goofus to their gallant in their kind of the videos you were talking about.
Sure. Can you give an example or two?
Sure. You had what the I haven't seen any of these videos you're talking about. You had them. Most of them wasn't about even kissing. That seemed to be one that you added at the end. The first ones were men wearing dresses and then bouncing up and down on TikTok, which I could definitely see why people would say that is an example of non-masculine behavior that they're trying to discourage.
Why?
Well, I mean, if you're trying to dress like a woman, aren't you definitionally trying to distance yourself from masculinity?
Not necessarily. I mean, it depends on how you define masculinity and femininity, right? Like, if we define masculinity and femininity by
female features, taking on female dress, taking on female aspect is definitionally not being masculine.
Well, female in like feminine and masculine in regard to our current culture, right? Like, so for example, like if we look throughout history, fashion trends, makeup, wigs, tights, all of this sort of stuff has sort of varied between
sure
different cultures and times and stuff like that
in relation to our current culture.
Yeah, so in that case, if a man is like, hey, I kind of want to wear a skirt or I want to wear a dress, that doesn't necessarily mean it's like, hey, I want to be a woman or I want to be womanly. That might just be I'm just a man who likes wearing.
That is what that means, dude. That is exactly what that means. If you are embracing signifiers of femininity, you are definitionally pushing away sort of a masculine approach. Now, you might want to signal femininity on Tuesday and then signal masculinity on Wednesday, and fair enough. But what I'm saying is that the embracing feminine signifiers is very definitionally not embracing masculine signifiers.
Well, yeah, but the issue here is that you're still defining masculinity and femininity based on arbitrary things such as clothing. So, for example,
that's not an arbitrary thing, though. That is not an arbitrary thing. That is a signal. That is a signal
no,
agree to in society.
Well, no, it is arbitrary because, as I just said, if you go throughout history, different cultures, you'll see varying degrees of styles of hair, dress, like the founding fathers wore tights, wigs, and heels.
Sure. No. What the specifics of the signal are change over time. You're absolutely correct. They change over time, but they are not arbitrary. Every single generation, every single group of people over all of human history decides on what those signifiers are going to be. In our modern, well, maybe not in our exact like super modern point of view, but very recently, through most of the last 100 years, part of signaling femininity is wearing a dress, putting on makeup, putting on long nails, etc.
But and so the issue So just to start, so the issue we have right here is that you kind of, because I've heard this argument on, it's a little bit faulty. So when you said, quote unquote, we as a society decide what determines masculinity and femininity, this is just demonstrably false. Because when you're saying this, you almost make it sound as if like everyone in a society got together and was like voting on like, hey, what should men wear and what should women wear? This is far and away just a complete disconnect from reality, because we didn't like. So, for example, when you were growing up, you didn't really get to decide what was considered. Society basically told you what was considered masculine and feminine, correct?
Sure.
Yeah. So the issue here is that it's kind of a two-pointer. So one, you're sort of insinuating that these men who wear this style of clothing, they're trying to be women or be feminine. When I mean, I would have to ask them. I can't read their mind. But it also might just be, well, no, I just like this clothing. I'm not trying to be more feminine. I just like this clothing. I mean, like, again, if we're gonna go that route, I mean, like, you could say that like a lot of bodybuilder fashion is kind of, very feminine in a sense, where it's like a lot of skin revealing, a lot of tight fit clothing. I really wouldn't, but you could make that argument. But two, and this is the other issue, is that we're kind of still working in this dichotomy where what defines masculine and feminine is based on one's clothing. So, for example, let's say we take a woman who is like an incredibly like pretty girl, like long hair, nails, makeup, but she wears like tomboy clothing, like baggy jeans, backwards baseball cap, very traditionally, quote unquote, like masculine clothing. Is she less of a woman because of that?
Okay, but you're getting into you're trying to be both vague and specific at the same time. I'm not saying that it makes someone less of a man. I'm saying they're signaling a feminine or masculine aspect. Now, that aspect is derived from our perceptions, let's say, on society, right?
You're based on the constraints of our one particular society.
Sure.
Okay.
Fine.
Well, that's important.
It's really not, but whatever.
Well, yeah, because it's like if we take like people in Scotland, men wearing kilts, in that culture, the kilts are not seen as feminine.
Yes, Scotland has defined that wearing a kilt is masculine. In Scotland, that is a masculine expression. But we all look. You're giving me the whole like, we don't define society in terms of these issues, but we absolutely do. We don't vote.
No, I'm saying
we do it through expressing ourselves.
No, I'm saying we do, and that's an issue.
It is what it is. It's always going to be that way. It's always been that way. It's not an issue.
It doesn't. Well, no, it doesn't have to be. Like, as we're seeing now, we see like men and women like completely breaking that down. Men can wear women's clothes. Women can wear. I mean, we see that with women completely, a lot more than with men. With women, women's fashion is all over the place. Women can wear blazers, dresses, high heels, Converse sneakers. So on the female side, we have seen a complete breakdown of what is traditionally, quote unquote, considered feminine clothing. I mean, you can still you can still kind of hang on to that like old, like 1950s, like wife sundress and whatnot. But the reality is, in today's day and age, women kind of have the freedom to wear whatever they please, and it doesn't really make them any more or less, quote unquote, feminine. I mean, to some people it does.
It absolutely, completely does make them less feminine in the eyes of those who look at them.
Who still latch on to those sort of old school views of what clothing is determined masculine and feminine.
You use the example of a tomboy, right? What is the point of the tomboy expression? The point of the tomboy expression is to signify a more masculine aspect of that woman. Now, it doesn't make her less. Hold on. It doesn't make her less of a woman, but it does signify that she wants to be considered as less feminine.
So like right there, that's the issue. So you're kind of assigning an intent to that, in the sense where if a woman wears jeans and say like a plaid t-shirt, then she is trying to signal like herself as more masculine. So
Yes.
my counter to that is, what if she went to the store, saw the clothes, she just liked them better, and then she just decided to wear those? You're kind of assigning this intent
There
that
is an
she's,
intent.
well, it's funny because she's not even like sort of like, it's almost sort of like weird because she's not even consenting to this process. Like she just kind of walks out into the world and say like a shirt and jeans she likes, and it's people around her that decide whether she looks masculine or feminine. Whether she may or may not have an intent. She's just wearing clothes that she likes.
Look, you're giving me the whole argument of basically, in the old watchmaker argument for God, the whole point of it is that uh, the fact that you can find the watch there must mean that someone had intent and built this object. People understand, and yes, they learn this from society as they go. You can say it's impressed upon them, um, that what these signals for things are. And if they don't learn them, then you're right. They can naively assume a style of dress that they don't realize what the signals of what they're saying are. That's completely 100% correct. People can absolutely naively wear the wrong thing. If I wear a clown suit to a fucking funeral, I'm making a mistake. I don't mean to sound like I'm mocking the people who are mourning, but that was my mistake. I naively assume that's what we do in the society.
Yeah, but
And then
that's
you
a
inform them that that's what you're signaling. You are signaling these things by what you wear. So yes, I mean you're basically assuming a naivete on the average person. I'm not. I'm assuming that people know that when they wear certain clothes, they're going to be signaling certain things, which is a completely fair assumption since most people do learn this pretty quick.
yeah, but so like the example you use about the clown at the funeral, like that's an example in which you doing so can cause sort of like people assume you're being offensive or as if you're being sort of like making a mockery. What is the issue of say like if a woman goes out and say like a plaid shirt and jeans? Is that having any sort of like demonstrably negative effect on the people around her?
No, but it is going to signal that she probably doesn't want to be necessarily hit on unless she's going to a lumberjack convention.
Wait, what?
Plaid shirt and jeans would be probably something I'd assume a lumberjack might wear. It's just a
No,
bad
I'm
chick.
saying, why would you think a woman in a plaid shirt and jeans wouldn't want to be hit on any more or less than a woman in, say, like a dress?
Because women generally are dressing themselves for effect in many cases, if not most cases. Women are very aware of social signaling and usually being aware of that make very intentional choices with what they wear.
Do they? Or are they just wearing clothes that they enjoy?
If a woman goes out on a date with a guy that she thinks she's got a good chance with or likes, she's probably going to doll herself up a little. I mean, you don't think that happens?
Well, it depends on what you mean by doll herself up. I mean, I've been on dates,
Make
like I've been
yourself
on,
look as attractive as she can.
yeah, but that could be, yeah, but that is depending on her own view of what she feels attractive in. Like I've been on first dates with women who were wearing a dress, and I've been on first dates with women who were wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Like, and they both look great.
Sure, you're right. And women are going to make those decisions. But, what you end up with is there are, what would the progressive word would be coded, right? They're coded towards a masculine or feminine kind of, aspect.
Yeah, but that's based on the constraints of a society. So what I am saying is that we're in a moment right now because we're not like, we're not like cavemen or animals. We have minds and we can make our own decisions. What our society as a whole is doing right now is basically saying like, look, these sort of like signals over like what is masculine clothing and what is feminine clothing, there doesn't seem to be that useful of utility for it. It doesn't really help us. It does actually harm us a lot. Like,
I don't think it
people,
harms us at all.
well, it does because if a guy wants to say it's like, hey, I really want to wear a dress or a skirt, and he goes out and he gets called queer and gets mocked for it, like, is that a good thing?
It can make them tougher, yeah.
What? What do you mean?
It's the boy named Sue, boy.
Wait, what?
You've never heard the song "A Boy Named Sue"?
No.
Oh, it's an old Johnny Cash standard about a boy whose name's Sue, so he had to get tough, make himself tougher, and deal with all the mockery he dealt with.
Well, but yeah, but like he shouldn't have to deal with that mockery, right?
What is have to? I'm not going to describe what I think a utopia is because we don't live in a utopia. I'm saying what a reliable projection of what reality is that it's probably going to happen. So if you want to
Yeah, but
signify,
the world would be a better place if, say, hey, if a kid just wants to go out in a skirt or a dress, it'd be kind of cool if like most guys just minded their own business and didn't like make fun of them or insult him or anything like that.
and most guys won't. But the fact is that look, if you're going to define reality by utopian standards, you're not going to be dealing with reality very quickly.
So there's a difference between what you're talking. We're kind of going in the extreme. Like you it seems like you're kind of flip flopping between extremes, where it's either like, since we can't have a utopia, we might as well just sort of like deal with what we have. Whereas my view is, it's like, hey, like obviously, like I agree with you, there will always be people like that out there, people who are just like mean people who like they see a guy just rocking a dress and or get like really hostile and attacking to him, as I feel as like my manly duty to be masculine. That's what I was taught by my mother, is to like go and say like, hey, you shouldn't do that, that's not cool, like fuck off.
Okay, and
Yeah, like, but that's kind of what my video was doing, but you seem to have an issue with it.
I mean, I think I said I rescinded my issue with it by the end of our brief conversation. So it's like, it's I realize you're right. It is your place to say what you feel, and that you're allowed to say what you want on your own platform.
Yeah, but aside from that, I'm talking about sort of like in your view of masculinity, what is the masculine thing? So again, I'm walking down the street. In front of me, there are two gay guys. A guy walks up and starts giving the gay guys shit, like, hey, what's up, queers? Is the masculine thing to do to sort of just walk on and not concern yourself? Or to confront that guy and say, like, hey, man, you shouldn't do that. Like, you. And I'm not using this like, I'm not using like this particular example. I'm using it sort of like in a broad sense, in the terms of when we are faced with people sort of being hostile to either, whether it's gay dudes or dudes like wearing non-masculine clothing, maybe guys who like to do drag or wear makeup, should we as a society, particularly men, because we're talking about masculinity, is the masculine ideal to sort of just like sit on our heels and like, well, they can, insult them if you want to, it's not my problem? Or is the masculine ideal to go up to them and say, hey, I'm defending my fellow man to do as he pleases. You, the person insulting this other man, are not living up to the principles of masculinity, and you should stop that.
I don't know. I guess I would say to that, I guess it would depend on how much harm you think is potential in that kind of situation. If you think someone's going to like escalate that to physical violence, you have every right to step in and prevent that harm from happening. 100%.
Well, let's do another example, just to get the physical harm part. I'm at the gym. There's a box gym around the corner that I go to. I'm at the gym. I see a skinny dude on the bench trying to lift, like he can only do the 45-pound bar. He's very, very skinny, weak. He's trying to do it. He's struggling. A couple guys walk by, and they're like, "Haha, what's up, weakling? What's up, loser? Ha ha ha." I'm staying there next to him. I'm just kind of doing my own thing. What do you think ideally is the masculine ideal? What should a man do in that situation?
You should go up to the kid after that happens and try to be there for him, probably.
So I shouldn't even tell the guys like, hey man, that's not cool. You shouldn't clown on someone who's trying to improve themselves?
Not necessarily, no.
Why not?
Because I think what you're doing is taking a potential learning experience for people who are going to be, in let's say a bullying behavior, that is going to potentially prevent them from learning why they're being dicks, basically.
Why were they being dicks?
There's a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, that's kind of like my view is like I don't really like from a dude's perspective. I'm like I would kind of go up to him and be like, "What are you doing? Like this dude is here in the gym. He's trying to improve himself. What are you doing trying to clown on him?" Now that could be for insecurity. That could be for a number of a number of reasons. But I mean, like, so like when you say that, like, I almost could see it as like, couldn't it be more of a learning opportunity for the guys being dicks to go up to them and
No.
if someone actually calls them out and they say, "Hey, man, like you shouldn't mock someone for trying to improve themselves." Couldn't that also lead to maybe those guys kind of, oh yeah, shit, maybe I shouldn't do that.
Let me
Maybe
ask you a basic question here. Have you ever worked security?
I have not.
I have. When you go into a situation where people are being hostile, uh, your presence, your interjection of it is a challenge. You are adding a challenge to the moment. You are increasing the chance that you're going to get more hostility directed at you. Now, when you're working security, that's your job. You know, your job is to intervene in these kinds of situations. But you know full well that you are basically bringing that challenge onto yourself, and things might escalate. The goal might be to de-escalate the situation. It's almost always to de-escalate the situation. And the fact is that you know what you're doing in that kind of scenario is being aggressive yourself, usually. Um,
But
and basically,
yeah, but
yeah,
isn't that good? Like, isn't that an instance
it,
of male
it very
aggression? As
well
I'm
can
trying
be
to
good.
sort of stick up for a man who's, who's below, I would like is weaker than me. Or I shouldn't say that. I should say who is in need of assistance or help.
Does he?
Well, I mean, yeah, if
You're
someone is
making an
giving,
assumption that he does.
well, yeah, if someone's giving him shit for just lifting,
Did he ask you to come in and help him?
he did not.
Well, then why are you helping him? Maybe he feels he's going to come up with a clever jab or the insult, or he's going to come up with his own defense. You're maybe taking away the chance of him learning how he should handle this scenario.
I mean, the issue there is like when we're talking about sort of like this idea of like, well, bullying can make you stronger. The issue is that that's sort of like a nihilistic view that like, well, bullying is just sort of going to happen no matter what, so you should be able to build a thicker skin. But the issue there is that when does it cross the line from like, because like there have been studies on this where, to your point, sort of like playful jabbing or sort of like like sort of like play bullying can be effective in sort of giving people a thicker skin, but then it crosses over into sort of just sort of like straight up maliciousness. So in this case, like, I mean either way. I mean, the issue with sort of your viewpoint is if you adopt that in all cases, that no one stands up for anything.
No, that's why I ask you those questions. Someone is asking for assistance. Okay, go assist them. Does it look like it's gonna get into a fight real quick? Okay, break it up. But if someone, those are very clear indicators of when you should intercede. But if someone's just using words, just being a dick to someone else, you know, you don't have any right necessarily to intercede in that situation, even if it's your job. Like when I used to work as a bouncer at a bar, I couldn't, hell, especially working as a bouncer, because when you're working as a bouncer, oh man, you can get into all sorts of trouble.
Yeah,
If you,
but we're talking about that's like sort of like a microcosm, like harm reduction, like certain specific case. If we apply that, like I consider if we apply that to sort of like the larger society at whole, where it's like, hey, if there is a general distaste for say homosexuality in the U.S., we as a society shouldn't push back against that because it might make the homophobes mad. So should we just like sit by and not do anything and allow? Because then we're kind of allowing them to sort of fester. We're kind of allowing it to. We're not again. We're not really standing up for it. We as a society are just kind of we're allowing it to happen because I guess we're afraid that it might escalate or like we might like upset like the people who were. And again, the key here is that it's not just them just like having certain beliefs. It's them imposing those beliefs on others. If a person like dislikes gay people, I mean, that person, in my opinion, sucks. But like, if that's just the case, I mean, like, okay, I mean, I can't do anything about it. I'm not gonna like put you in a room and like interrogate you until you stop it. But if you then go out and start putting that shit out there, you know, like insulting gay people or talking to people online, calling gay people degenerate, as I see in like the, you know, reject modernity videos, that, and the fact that you wouldn't consider, so in that case, am I just supposed to not say anything or not combat that and just say, it's like, well, it's their right to hold those beliefs? It's like, well, so like I'm kind of confused.
Well, I guess what I would say is that you need to know very much. You need to know more about yourself in this kind of scenario. We're just going to talk about you and how you feel about these videos, because that was the topic of your video, right? Um, you need to know where you stand on this and what effect you might have and what you're actually potentially able to accomplish. If you see guys doing this stuff, you know, it's completely within your right to make that decision. That's how you feel, that, you know, okay, I don't think this is cool, you guys should knock it off. But does you making a video on your own channel where none of those guys are going to see it do anything? Doesn't. They're not seeing that.
Well, the
guys
vast
you're talking
majority,
about don't
the
see
vast
it.
majority, I mean, a lot of guys did because they searched for it. That was the whole point.
No,
Is
but
that like,
no, that they're going in a different direction there. They're seeing your video and then going to those videos. The dudes who left the insults in the comment section or whatever didn't come from that video to your video. They would have no necessary, unless they're already a fan of yours, right? So that's
yeah,
a very
but yeah,
small
this,
slice.
yeah, but this
of
goes
people.
along, to your point where I can't stop those people from making those videos. Obviously, I would never try to. It's their right to make them. But what I can do, like as I say at the end of the video, I'm like, hey, hopefully if you're like a new guy who isn't sucked into the shit already, you see this one and it kind of snaps you out of it.
Okay, can I give you a story that explains some of where I'm coming from here?
Sure.
All right, so when I was a kid, um, I had a another kid. This would have been like second grade, I think. And you know, he started bullying me. I was playing the Game Boy during recess, and he started, like, you know, throwing shit at me, picking on me, and it led to, you know, me standing up for myself, me kind of like pushing back at him, basically challenging him to a fight. It led to a big old fight on the grade. On the other, it was a funny school. We had two different playgrounds, on two different sides of the school. On the other playground, from the first one where this initially occurred, we got into a big old fight over it. And it felt really good. You know, I had defeated the bully. I had been able to stand up for myself, you know, as a man or whatever, like my dad might have said to me at some point when I was younger. And it was really, you know, it felt really good. A few years later, it's fourth grade. I get glasses. And, you know, I'm from, my parents are divorced. My mom can't really afford to keep buying me glasses when I'm breaking them playing like soccer or baseball, which I did. I went through like 3 pairs of frames, constantly breaking them. So I become less physical, less active in sports, and I get, you know, a little fatter, a little nerdier. Start hanging out with the other indoor kids, you know, becoming their friend. Now I get to see what bullying is like of all the other indoor kids from their perspective, because now I'm one of them. A few more years go by. Now I'm in middle school, and in middle school, I can't even remember how it began, but I had this friend who really hated this other kid. And like, I don't even remember what the issue was about at this point, but he started teasing this other kid and making fun of him, and probably to back up my friend, I started doing the same. And for like a whole year, we made this other kid's life a living hell. And I felt really bad about it towards the end of the year, and cut off contact with this friend who was like, you know, making kind of like getting me to go along with him and make this other kid's life hell. And in eighth grade, I even tried to apologize to him, and probably didn't have the social awareness to get why when he really didn't accept my apology, how bitter he was at me. And I didn't really handle that probably as well as I could have. But the thing was that I went through defending myself from bullies. I went through being bullied. And by the time I started bullying this one kid, I thought I was completely justified, thought I was completely, I was very self-righteous. I couldn't be the bully because, I'm not a bully. I defend myself from bullies. I'm not a bully. I've been bullied. uh, I had to learn by being the bully, by being the dick, why it's not good to be the dick. And I think a lot of guys don't learn from what you tell them to do or tell them what to think. I think a lot of guys learn experientially. They learn from doing. They learn from actually doing the thing. And this is where, when it comes to like things like words and trying to police male behavior with words, my concern is that if you get too strong with the policing, you take away essentially a part of a learning process that guys go through of, well, maybe I shouldn't be such a douchebag after they feel shame for being one. And if you just, if you do kind of like the make society a nice padded cell where all the corners are rubbed off and we, are hyper vigilant at making everything softer and softer and no one can harm each other through our social, building of more and more social rules that prevent aggression. These guys don't ever really learn why this, over aggressive behavior, this kind of douchebaggery, they don't learn why that's bad for themselves, not because someone told them, but for themselves on their own terms. And that to me, that whole experience it was important to me. It was part of how I grew up and changed who I am or developed, right?
So
So
yeah, so
yeah,
I understand what you're saying, but it's really weird. So it's very not good. So like the problem here is that you're kind of like speaking in like absolutes, whether it's like like you're almost setting up a scenario where it's like we're either going to be a society where like you said, like padded cells, everyone doesn't hurt anyone's feelings, or we should just like allow rampant bullying. Um so like yeah, we're kind of like dealing with these extremes. Like there's no middle ground of
well, that's because
yeah,
we're talking in a debate format.
well, yeah, but like we want to add, you can add nuance. Debates don't have to be completely lacking in nuance, but in this case, like with your story, there's like, and I kind of got this from what you were talking about before. It seems like your concern is more about the people being like more about the aggressor than the person who's like falling victim to the aggressor in the situation. So, for example, in this case, like you like I'm glad that you stopped being a dick, but that I'm sure the kid who you were a dick to kind of wishes you had figured that out maybe like
Sure.
several years before that. So the issue there is that like what would that entail? Is like if we see someone bullying people, we should, it's like, well, those kids, they need to do that and inflict harm on others, whether it's words or violence or whatever. They need to do that so then they can grow up and stop being that way. Then the question I would pose to you is that what if they don't? Like, like everyone has that story about the school bully who grows up to be a cop or something, or at least is like still a bully. I would love to say that people grow out of it, but that's not always the case. And usually, in most cases, when people do grow out of it, it's because they kind of had a wake up. They didn't just like wake up one day. It's like, oh, huh, maybe I should stop. I should stop doing that thing that I've been doing for the last year. It's usually because maybe someone called them out saying, it's like, hey, you shouldn't do that. That's kind of stupid. That's kind of cringe. And also, just to rewind, because just to go back to like the analogy of like the kid in the gym, thinking about it, I actually, to kind of amend my, because you kind of made me see a different view of it. I don't like how you kind of kept sort of like, it seemed like you were kind of prioritizing the bully's feelings, which was kind of strange. But in that case, what I might do is like if the guys came up to the skinny kid, and like we're giving him shit, I might hold back and kind of like see how the kid handles it. But then if I see like he looks down on himself, then I might go over. And then maybe the next day, if the bullies come back, then I might say something. So like in that case, I understand what you were saying. However, we can't even really apply that to like these like reject modernity videos, because it's not, it's sort of like in this vacuum of guys. Like it's not, it's like, like a lot of people even in the comments were saying, it's like, well, we're trying to show guys like these guys in the video that like we're just poking fun at them. But that's sort of like disingenuous. Like the guys who like are being featured in the video probably aren't going to see the video. It's not for them. It's just a bunch of guys just like sitting in a circle laughing at people they deem as weak or degenerate or pathetic. So that doesn't even really apply to the.
Well, wait, hold on.
Videos.
How's it being disingenuous if they're saying that we're poking fun at these other people? They are poking fun at them, right?
Well, what is your definition of poking fun? If I see like, hey, this guy who's like
okay, fine,
wearing a dress.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I'll agree to it. They're not just poking fun. They're being dicks. They're insulting them, right? Yeah. They're saying that that's what they're doing, and that's what they're doing. So how is that disingenuous?
Well, no, because a lot of guys aren't saying that. Like there are some guys who just like blatantly admits like, yes, we are insulting these guys in dresses because that's degenerate behavior. But my concern, it really is, and like you said, it really isn't those guys. Like I got a lot of comments on the video saying it's like, yes, this is like men in dresses as the downfall of society, and like homosexuality is like a CIA operative like conspiracy. Like I understand that those guys I'm probably not going to be able to reach, but my concern is guys who come into it and sort of, cause that's kind of why I went over the whole SJW meme. The whole thing with the SJW cringe meme was that the vast majority of guys who got into it or kind of were attracted to the videos they weren't doing so because they had like these like deep ideological perspectives about like leftism and liberalism. They just like laughing at people doing cringy stuff. So when other guys come into this and then they see all these videos saying, hey, guys wearing dresses, overweight people attending Pride Parade, this is degenerate, weak behavior. What is that going to impose on those guys?
Well, but again, you're getting into sort of a theory of media application where you're not really trusting the audience, I guess would be a way of putting it. You're just sort of assuming that people can't see this and judge for themselves. That you're they're gonna be led through propaganda to being, total dick. And
I mean, yeah, that's kind of why I brought up the whole SJW cringe thing, because that is like, we saw that play out in real time. Like that is exactly what happened.
But but at the same time, you're willing to defend video games, which do that entire argument again, that, people can't make their own decisions when it comes to real world violence versus video game violence.
Well, no, because with video games, we've done countless studies on it, and people who play video games are no more or less violent than people who don't. In this case,
so the difference isn't just, hold on,
it's not like someone like watches an SJW cringe video and then goes out and like beats up a gay person. That's not how it works. What I mean by that is guys kind of come into this, they see that like, hey, guys wearing dresses, guys kissing, guys attending a pride parade, this is degenerate behavior, this is not good. And they sort of absorb that, because again, like a lot of guys who watch these videos, like, they're younger kids, especially like the bodybuilding scene. They see that, and that shapes their viewpoints going through life. I mean, yeah.
But shouldn't they have the ability? Okay, shouldn't they be the ones that make that decision, that they reject that, right?
But when we're talking about like young impressionable guys, how
when
do
we're
they
talking
know
about
to
young
reject?
Impressionable kids playing violent video games?
Like in your case, well, no, because again, we've talked about that, where we've seen studies where there's no correlation.
But you also just admitted
you're also jumping from like playing video games to like going on like a shooting spree. Whereas what I'm saying is like, hey, if you watch content that tells you that like, hey, being gay or like a dude wearing a dress is degenerate behavior, it's not all that surprising that a lot of guys who watch that a lot end up believing that guys who wear dresses or gay guys are degenerates.
Well, if they watch it a lot, they're choosing that.
Wait, choosing what?
They're choosing that philosophy. Look, if they're watching it a lot, then they're making a choice that, you know, they agree with that kind of aspect, aren't they? Versus, I mean, you're talking about like what, watching one video, then falling down a rabbit hole and becoming, you know, becoming a neo-Nazi terrorist or something.
Well, again, we're kind of like, but the issue is like you kind of like you're working in extremes here. I'm just saying in this
You
case,
are too, though.
well, no, not really. We're talking
Yeah,
about guys
yes,
who
you
come
are.
in, they see videos
You're
that
like,
signal like, hey, guys wearing dresses or guys that are gay are non-masculine. It, like, and especially like consider if like guys like sort of like come across that, and then like one of those kids like starts to feel like, oh, hey, I actually might be gay. They've seen all this content that says, hey, being gay is degenerate. What is the effect going to be on that kid?
I don't know.
Well, I can tell you because we know through just based on our society, is that general negative outlooks against homosexuality or just trans people or whatever has a negative effect on their mental well-being.
Okay. A lot of things have a negative effect on a lot of people's well-beings.
Yeah. So my only suggestion for these videos was like, hey, I like all the motivation stuff, but all the other stuff it seems unnecessary. If your goal is to just motivate people to be masculine or just be, you know, be these people you want them to be, I mean, that's fine. It may not match up with my view of masculinity, but like you're free to do that. But when you then attack other men or sort of like frame other men as if they're degenerate or bad, that doesn't seem necessary to the goal that they're trying that they say that they're trying to reach, which is inspire other men. It's a difference between like
what you have there is that you disagree with what is necessary with them. If they feel that is necessary for their expression of how they want to encourage masculinity, in the cases you showed, none of it was about attacking people. None of it was about, hey, we should totally beat up these gay guys. None of it was about,
well, no, hang on,
going after people.
hang on again. We're jumping to like the extremes. Like you're saying, it's not like it's not a video of like a hate gang like dragging a gay guy behind a truck. It's like, well, yeah, I'm sure YouTube wouldn't allow that. But what I'm saying is that if I show a pride parade and then say reject degeneracy,
Yeah, and go.
what what signal is that sending to the audience?
I think it signals that they think that is degeneracy.
Yeah.
And
should we not call that out for like, hey, that's kind of cringe?
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily cringe. It's a different opinion on things. I haven't seen these videos, so I don't have like a opinion on them.
Wait. What?
I've seen your video.
But you didn't watch the videos they were in response to?
No. Like I
Why?
said, I watched your videos and then it linked me your video after the Evan Hansen one.
Wait, but why didn't you? I mean, I kind of went under the assertion that like you kind of saw everything in full context.
No, I've seen your video complaining about these other videos.
Oh, well, I mean, I would go and watch those videos because like
why would I? They don't seem very appealing to me. I feel very comfortable in my masculinity. I don't need anyone telling me how to feel about it.
But how can you say that what I'm doing is like sort of uncalled for if you don't know what I'm responding to?
Because I'm going off of the examples you used in your video to demonstrate what you're talking about.
Yeah. So if I'm saying it's like, hey guys, it's cool if you want to like tout masculinity, but if you kind of create the impression that say like being gay makes you non-masculine, that's not good and you shouldn't do it.
Sorry, what was that? I was looking at a text. What was that?
So if the video is about sort of, you know, being trying to be masculine and sort of inspiring other men, if your video communicates a message of, hey, being gay or wearing, you know, non-masculine clothing is degeneracy and it's not good and you shouldn't do it, is that not something that you would believe warrants to be called out and critiqued?
Your video didn't say that they were saying that they were degeneracy. It was saying that they were not masculine. And in at least the case of wearing dresses, I would say that is That is an example of non-masculine behavior.
Well, I mean,
So
again, well, this is kind of frustrating. Like, if you had watched the videos, you would know that like reject degeneracy is also another big part of these. And again, even so, like then there's also the video of just guys kissing or people at a pride parade.
So your issue with them is that you define degeneracy differently than these video creators.
Well, I'm kind of asking them. It's like, why do you think like being gay or attending a pride parade is degeneracy?
There could be all sorts of reasons.
Well, yeah, because they're homophobic. Would you deny
That
that?
could be one of them. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have issues with people, announcing sort of I don't know, a kind of. I think a lot of guys feel like in a world where masculinity is very heavily scrutinized, you see a lot of promotion of femininity amongst men. They feel like that's what's going on when it comes to, say, the wearing of the dresses.
So we're kind of wrapping back around to the original logical fallacy of your.
What's the logical fallacy here?
So, like you mentioned in your video, or sorry, your comment, it was, because I kind of mentioned it's like, hey, truly non-masculine traits like a lack of courage, integrity, or supporting your fellow man, and you stated, for a lot of dudes, giving in to the many obvious social pressures to embrace a feminine presentation is lacking courage.
Yeah.
So, but again, we're sort of like we're assigning an intent there. In your view, these guys. So, like in my view, what I would say is like, well, these guys seem like they want to wear this clothing and they just do it. And I actually think that could be seen. That's like courageous, but I think it does take balls to, it's like, hey, if I want to wear a dress, I'm gonna wear a dress, and if people have a problem with it, I'll just deal with it because I know there are gonna be people out there who are going to criticize me for it. But in your view, these men are doing so because they have been sort of like pressured by society to not be manly and embrace this feminine aesthetic.
I mean, yeah, a lot of people feel that way.
Well, hang on. Well, I don't care how you feel, but I'm saying in these, you're kind of asserting that about these guys' personality without knowing anything about them.
I mean, you are too, though.
No, I'm not. I'm saying we don't
You
know.
know all these video creators? That's amazing.
No. I'm talking about the guys in the videos who like are wearing skirts or dresses or anything.
You think they're all doing it to be brave and stand up against homophobia? They're not doing it for social media likes.
No, I'm
They're not doing
saying
it so they can get
no. I'm
attention and
saying
affirmation.
I'm saying I have no idea. So why are we judging them based off stuff we can't confirm?
You keep pulling this thing where you like assume that people just do things naively out of nowhere. Oh, I didn't know that wearing. I just felt really comfortable in a dress, and I didn't know that signaled femininity. How? Oh, it's such a surprise that this signals femininity. How did that happen? Like, come on, dude.
No, I'm saying if a guy wants to wear a skirt because he wants to wear a skirt, I'm not going to
He knows what he's
assign.
doing,
I'm not.
though. If he does that, right?
Well, that because he wants to wear a skirt, yeah.
He's signaling that he wants to appear feminine.
So even if that was the case, to your point, when you're saying it's like, well, he's doing that because do you feel like that's because of social pressure?
With some cases, it very well can be.
Okay, but you don't know which cases.
You're right. I don't know, but neither do
Yeah.
you.
Yep. No, yes, but hang on. But that's the entire point. I'm saying I don't know, which is why I am not going to judge the men. You're saying you do know, and that's why we can judge the men. Do you see the difference?
No, what I'm saying is that I can assume that people aren't complete naive morons. I'm going to assume that people know what they're doing when they make certain signals. Yeah, I'm going to assume that. I think that's a fair assumption that gives people
No,
agency.
hang on.
You're
You're
kind of
getting
like
away.
basically going with an anti-agency argument here.
No.
A
You're
lot of the
going.
time.
No, you're jumping topics. We're talking specifically about the social pressure aspect. So, do you feel that these guys in these videos, if a guy decides like, hey, I want to wear a skirt or a dress or wear makeup, that is primarily due to them falling victim to social pressure and thus demonstrating a lack of courage, which is worthy of criticism?
It can be, yeah.
It can be. Great. We agree. What I'm saying is because since we don't know these men, judging them for a lack of courage seems very silly. Would you not agree?
Potentially.
Yeah. So just the same way that if I saw a bodybuilder, in the gym, he could be doing it because he is just doing it for himself and he wants to excel, or because he's incredibly insecure and has to sort of like mask the fact that he has no self-confidence by getting bigger muscles. However, I don't know that, and thus I feel like it would not be logical to judge someone based off of those, like that appearance. What I was saying was, hey, if we have people who actually demonstrate actions that communicate a lack of integrity, courage, or supporting your fellow man, then have at it. We should criticize that because they are communicating who they are through their actions. But if I just see a guy wearing a dress or a guy who is like super ripped and muscular, that really doesn't tell me that much about who they are as a person, their integrity, their courage, or whether or not they support their fellow man. So it's very frustrating to see all these videos that seem to make very strong assumptions about these people, whether at a pride parade, or they're gay, or a dude who wears a dress, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're kind of like allowing their emotions to sort of like assign intent to them. Like they're judging them based off of their appearance, what their character is. What I'm saying is, hey, if there are guys who are actually demonstrating non-masculine traits, guys who are picking on people weaker than them, guys who are not taking care of those who love, men who are liars, men who take advantage of other people, absolutely criticize the fuck out of those people. But when you look at someone, it would be the same thing if I saw like a guy who's in the gym like lifting a lot, he's got big muscles, and I just assume it's like, oh well, he must be like super insecure. Like I would never do that. I would never judge him in that fashion. So I don't understand. Like that's basically what these videos are doing, are they not?
I mean, yeah, that they're making assumptions. Yes, they are making assumptions.
Yeah.
But the assumptions they're making are based off of people. I mean, if they're looking at TikTok videos, right, and people sharing stuff on social media, those people are doing it for attention, for validation, or for some reason that probably equates to something similar. I think when you look at a guy,
couldn't I say that about literally anyone on social
TikTok,
media?
they're probably doing that for TikTok likes.
But couldn't I say that about literally anyone? Like, can I say that equally about the bodybuilders who they praise in the embrace masculinity section?
Sure, you can.
Okay, so that shows a sort of like a mental disconnect in the presentation of the videos.
I don't see how. I think they're being thematically consistent.
Well, no, because they're saying reject degeneracy, and it shows a guy like in a skirt on TikTok, and then it shows embrace masculinity, and then it shows a guy showing off his muscles on TikTok or YouTube. But if the non-masculine thing, or the thing that we're criticizing, is people putting themselves out there for validation on social media, shouldn't both of these guys be being criticized for that?
Yeah, sure. I would agree.
Okay.
I criticize absolutely everyone who participates in social media. I think it's all a shit show.
Okay, so in this case, the videos in that case are thematically inconsistent.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Yeah, we agree on that.
Yeah. I mean, look, I was using that as just one example of how to look at that situation. To kind of maybe reframe the idea. Look, I play devil's advocate all the time. If you're saying that you said that you think, what was it? I'm concerned with the aggressor. Well, yeah, I like to try to empathize with people and see where they're coming from. Try to take their side in it to see if I can understand why people do these kinds of things.
Well, hang on. No, because that's different. If I understand why a guy might be disgusted by gay people, I understand why. I can empathize with that. I won't sympathize with it, but I empathize. I understand. But under no circumstances would I ever say that makes it okay or permissible to then direct hate or malice, or even if it's mocking, at a gay person.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's just like a basic principle of, if we're talking about masculinity, I think that's just like a basic like, hey, you should support your fellow man. You should not just needlessly attack them or mock them or put them down because you want to feel bigger. Isn't that, wouldn't that be a sign of weakness? That they can't, like if that person has those feelings, like we have feelings all the time, but as, I mean, as people, but especially like as men, like the one of the main tenets of masculinity is sort of like stoicism, like a control. Like men are not emotional. The idea is that you're in control of your emotions. You can control how you react to situations regardless of how you're feeling. So if these men can't control their disgust for these gay people, that they like sort of like spit out this vitriol, isn't that a tenet of non-masculinity in the sense that they are not able to sort of control their emotions in that situation?
I mean, it can be if you're going with a stoic outlook, sure.
Yeah. I mean, I can't see.
I mean, are you a stoic? Do you follow stoicism? Are you reading Marcus Aurelius every morning?
I mean, honestly, I think that it's important to have control over your emotions. That is not to say you cannot be emotional, but it's important to have control over your emotions. Otherwise, your emotions end up dictating your behavior, and that can lead to bad outcomes for you and others.
Yeah, I agree.
From a
I mean,
from a philosophical standpoint, I don't really care. It's mostly just for like what is better for you and the people around you, particularly
okay.
the person himself. I think for a lot of men, they aren't really given the tools to sort of regulate or sort of process their emotions. So what ends up happening is they kind of get them all bunched up. They have like, so guys have all these emotions. They're never taught how to process them. So once they get to, in their 20s or 30s, they're grown men, but they have the emotional regulation of like a toddler. And it's not their fault. It's because society never gave them the skills to be able to process their emotions. And usually that leads to it usually, for men, it seems like it leads to either one extreme or the other. Either they're like hyper stoic and they like batten down the hatches and they never talk about their emotions ever, or they are complete emotional wrecks and they like fall into like severe depression. It's like with women, it seems like it kind of is like it
Hold on,
it
though.
varies.
Why do you think that is?
What?
Why do you think that this is what society kind of like gets men into? What's your theory on it?
That why men struggle, like they aren't given the
Yeah.
permissible
Why
to
do men
process
struggle
emotion?
with their emotions?
Because in general, our society does not really find that permissible.
Why?
It's seen as, in general, it's seen as non-manly for a guy to cry or to be emotional or to be vulnerable or sensitive.
You don't think that has anything to do with maybe a general society-wide kind of embrasure of a feminine perspective, at least in the last 30, 40 years?
Wait, how would it?
That society is basically, at least the sort of media society, the sort of uh, mass media society that we live in, that it's over the last 20 to 40 years, somewhere in that range, has largely taken feminine perspectives or female perspectives as maybe the default, and that maybe the reason men can't emotionally be allowed to kind of figure themselves out is that it just doesn't care about how men feel.
But what's an example of like how that would affect men? Like this problem existed.
Well, all the examples you just gave, that men end up either emotional train wrecks or hyper stoic until they snap.
But you're kind of assigning that without any sort of connective tissue. So like this problem existed before the implementation of feminism. Like this sort of like idea of men always being like these stoic, non-emotional creatures has been around for a very long time. So what I'm saying is like, how do you sort of connect that to men not being able to emote themselves? You're kind of saying it, but I'm saying like, how do you connect the two? It might be a cause, but I'm trying to find, like, I'm trying to understand A to B.
Well, I mean, how did you put it in your video about dating? It was, what did you say? It was that you think people like approach others they're comfortable with, right? That they have. What did you use? It was like the people are basically going to different self-help kind of gurus, whether they're pickup guys or
Yeah.
MRAs, because they're
A guy would be more likely, like, for sort of like, If they're trying to figure out how to process their emotions, they'd probably more often than not gravitate towards a guy they can relate to on more of a personal level, as opposed to, say, a woman, on average. And
Yeah.
vice versa for women, of course.
So what if, I mean, because you're kind of also framing that stoic behavior in men is maybe the cause of emotional instability.
Well,
And that's
no,
the,
more sort of like the sort of expectation of like I think you can, like, again, like stoicism to me isn't being in control of your emotions. You can process your emotions. That isn't that isn't the same thing as sort of like locking, like think of it like stoicism. I would think of it like is like I am friends with my emotions. I'm sort of like I'm sort of in tune with them. We're kind of like on the same
well, that wouldn't be
wavelength.
stoicism though. That would be something else. But stoicism
No,
is
no,
about
no.
control.
But yeah, that's what I mean. Control. That's what I'm saying. We kind of have control over it. This is sort of like
Control is not friendliness though.
well, regardless, I think we're kind of on the same wavelength there. But on the what I'm talking about, what a lot of men find themselves in is not that. What I'm talking about is there's like, imagine like a monster trying to like bash down a door, and the guy is like desperately trying to keep the door closed. And that's how a lot of guys exist. They're never able to sort of control that monster. It's like always at bay, trying to barge a door down, and the guy is like desperately trying to keep it closed with every bit of strength he has left. Eventually, for a lot of guys, if they're unable to do that, the door bursts open and they like fall into a complete emotional mess.
Yeah. And I mean, you're kind of, the way you were framing that a second ago, it kind of seemed like stoic behaviors, which have been around for a very long time, were a cause of that.
No, not necessarily stoicism. The sort of expectation for men to never be emotional at all or ever display emotion, because you can't get control of your emotions if you never kind of interact with them.
Sure, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, but I don't. I mean, that's people. Men have been interacting with their emotions for an extremely long period of time. I mean, men used to be presumed to be the largest amount of poets, for example, which is pure emotional writing. You know.
Yeah, but if we look at society today, we kind of have this sort of like this battening down, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying, sort of like as a sort of like a combat to like whether feminism or the quote unquote female perspective. It ends up resulting in men kind of doubling down, where it's not just, it's like, hey guys, you should sort of like, you should have a healthy relationship or healthy control of your emotions. It's like, don't cry because women don't like that. Don't cry, it's not what men do. Don't be emotional. Be objective.
Well, I mean, you were the one saying that men shouldn't be emotional.
Well, no, there's a difference between being like sort of like an emotional wreck, like allowing your emotions to define your behavior, and having control over those emotions, where you can feel your emotions, you recognize them, like, oh, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling angry. It's a difference between like if I'm at the bar and a guy like gives me shit, I might feel anger, but then it's like I would just like, you know what, I'm feeling anger right now, but I'm not going to escalate the situation. Whereas another guy gives him shit, and then his first instinct, his anger takes over, and he like decks the guy, and it causes a huge fight, and he gets arrested.
Yeah, believe me, I've dealt with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Believe me, I've had to be in the middle of that fight.
Yeah, and that's not as a result of the guy being like he's a bad person. I mean, like he might be. I mean, I guess in some cases, but more often than not, when we talk about like toxic masculinity, that's sort of the idea of like, well, I have to prove myself, or like my emotions sort of like take over, as opposed to not having control over the emotions.
Yeah, but toxic masculinity is a theory of masculinity that comes from a feminist perspective. It's not coming from any kind of masculine perspective. It's imposed on men and masculinity from a feminist perspective. And one of the biggest problems, I would argue, certainly academically, is that no one's listening to what men feel for and from themselves. They're taking a feminist perspective and a feminine perspective and looking at men through that lens, which is why you're never going to get any solutions that men will, sign on with and on board with from those perspectives.
Which I agree with. Which is why I even state in the video, I am all for male spaces. what pisses me off, and that's one of the things that drove me to make the video as well as the male dating video, is that when I look at these spaces that try to quote unquote give a male perspective or try to quote unquote help men or lift them up, it only leads to exacerbating the problem. Red pill, MRA, incel, this reject modernity bullshit. Like they're like, oh, we're trying to lift men up. We're trying to like be there for men, which is a noble intent, but it just ends up in resulting in just awful outcomes for these men.
You know, I think maybe one thing that I can say specifically about your video is that I think you didn't, to put it in kind of what the academics speak, you didn't interrogate your own notion enough. In that, what's really bothering you, it seems to me, is that what you're concerned about is sort of ideological recruitment more than anything else. And it's not, you know, that seems to be what, that's the aspect that's bothering you, but you never really went out and kind of directly said that or made that the emphasis.
Well, if that ideology is guys sort of like having a viewpoint of masculinity where it's like that part of it is sort of like putting down other men, yes.
Yeah, but you really, I don't know, it was kind of like...
I think the reason is like, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I'm trying to like, are you saying that I should have been like, it's like, well, I can understand that some people believe that being
no, hold on. What I'm
other
actually really
men
talking
down.
about here, hold on. What I'm talking about here is mostly writing, I guess, language use. You know, you use the word toxic a lot in your videos, I've noticed. I hate that word because it is so fucking vague. It is never specific. And at least when it comes to writing, what I was always taught is that if you have a choice between a vague word and a specific word, go with the specificity. It gets to what you really mean. And using stuff like toxic, it just means bad. It just
I mean, yeah, but like it leads to men believing that the idea of masculinity is putting other men down, which in turn leads to more sort of like just negativity being spread out into the world. So yeah.
But what I mean is if you're going to talk about it, you have to be more specific with your language rather than just putting toxic and that's it. And you're kind of like.
But that, I mean, like you just said, like toxic means bad. I'm like, yeah, it's this isn't good. It's not good when men believe that putting other men down is what makes a man. Yeah.
But why is it bad? Like that's what I'm.
Why is it bad if men put other men down to lift themselves up?
Yeah, that's what you need to interrogate further. That's what you need to kind of delve into.
Well, no, I can tell you why it's bad, because it just leads to men being pushed down. If okay. Like my ideal isn't just for like in general for men, it's for all men. So if I see, what I want is like guys to come together and be like, hey, let's help each other out, let's lift each other up. But if I see guys whose mentality is, hey, only half of us can be lifted up, and in order to do so, we have to stand on the heads and push down the other half, that's not good.
You didn't really express that very directly, at least not in the video.
I think I did.
I didn't really feel like you did.
Well, did you not feel it, or did I not? I'm gonna have to give it.
Since you're the one communicating, if I didn't feel it, then you didn't, would be my response to that.
Yeah, but that might just be due to your own like subjective like emotional behavior. Like in the video, if I remember.
Then there's a whole debate here about who's more responsible for clear communication, the one communicating or the one receiving. I would tend to say it's on the one communicating.
Yeah, but that could be taken that could be taken to such a ridiculous extent. Like I could make a video saying like I like cats, and you're like, so you're saying you hate dogs. Like to some extent, it kind of gets like, okay, like, your interpretation of this is kind of ridiculous. But in my like, I'm trying to think of the video. What I said, I believe, at the end was like, if it's just about positivity, why is there like I'm all for like I say at the very end, I'm all for positivity. I'm all for like having dudes excel to better themselves. But when it comes along with sort of like this mockery of like shitting on other dudes, that doesn't seem to make any sense, especially if the goal of these videos is to lift men up. It's about masculinity, which is all men, not just this very narrow group of men.
But that isn't what those videos are about, is it? It's about them trying to lift up a specific set of men, and then they're cultivating a group, right?
Who views
the content creators who make these,
Well,
embrace modernity or reject modernity, embrace masculinity videos?
well, that's sort of the point. Is like I say at the end, I don't actually know. I have a feeling some of them do, but then when you actually look at the comments, like from that creator, I actually don't. My worry, my concern is that a lot of guys are just kind of like, they're not even really kind of thinking about it. They're just kind of watching it, and they're kind of being fed these views without even sort of like again, like that was the whole thing with the SJW cringe stuff. It was like, it's just look at this like blue-haired idiot like screaming at people, and then all of a sudden there'd be like a Ben Shapiro clip. It's like, here's why poor people deserve to be poor, and you're like, wait, I'm sorry, what?
Has Ben Shapiro ever actually said that?
Yes.
Wow, damn.
Or I should say, if you're sorry, he said, if your parents are poor, it's because they suck with money, to a high school. That was a really popular clip going around for a while.
But isn't that kind of what you're doing in your video, though, to a certain degree?
What?
Doing it in a nicer way.
What?
Well, you're kind of saying, whenever you do any kind of like tone policing or like message policing, you're kind of just sort of signaling to your audience that these things that my political sort of or philosophical leanings believe in, these things are bad and these things are good. I mean, that's what Ben Shapiro is doing.
Well, yeah, because in my view, like with my points, I can demonstrably point to harm. So, for example, in this case, if this viewpoint, the ideology of the videos is that we have to push other men down to lift ourselves up, that does a negative. That does like it leads to negative results for the men being pushed down. My view is like, hey, why don't we all like rise up together?
Okay, but why didn't you just make a video talking about that concept by itself?
What?
Where you just did a video, well, maybe like you did it. Let's consider if that was the point of your video, then you would have done a whole video just on Z's or Ziz, or how do you pronounce his name? You would have just talked about, maybe the camaraderie and stuff you can build up for masculinity. No, your video is also about taking down another group of content creators, essentially.
Correct.
Saying,
because they were pushing a very harmful ideological perspective.
Well, but my point is that if you really fully believed in just sort of the positive masculinity video, you would have made a video specifically about that message. You had to put an adversarial element about these people who you disagreed with and put that in, which means that ultimately
because they made it adversarial in the first place. If like let's say like three guys are walking,
not to you, though.
Let's say a guy's walking down. Let's say a guy's walking down the street. Another guy comes up, he starts like punching him and hitting him. If I break that up, would you say to me, it's like, hey man, you were being adversarial? It's like, well, I had to.
What was your example again? It's raining.
So, for example, a guy's walking down the street. Another guy walks up to him, starts like beating up or hitting him. The guy's on the ground, like covering himself. I go over, I push the other guy off, and like we kind of get into it. And then you come over and you get on my case saying, "Hey, man, why were you so adversarial there?" It's like, well, I mean, in my case, I didn't really have a choice because the other guy started the conflict when he was beating up the other guy.
You were just criticizing me for going to extremes. That's an extreme example.
Well, no, I'm just using it as a metaphor. In this case,
it's an extreme metaphor.
Well, no, not really. In this case, the guys who are making these videos, they're the ones who are like putting down other men. Like they could have just made if they
it's
just made the video.
It's not an extreme metaphor because you use an example of actual violence, but when we're talking about videos that feature no actual violence or promotion of violence, okay, that's not an extreme metaphor. Gotcha.
Do you not see the reject modernity, embrace mask? Like the title itself is like. The title itself is inherently adversarial. Is it not?
I'm not saying it's not adversarial, but it's not violence.
Well, no, hey, we're not talking about violence. We're talking about.
You just were. You just tried to make it about this weird.
Okay. Scrub. Okay, I think it went over your head. Scrub the metaphor. If we're just talking about being adversarial, if those guys, these content creators, made it adversarial, and then I come in and say it's like, okay, well, if you want to make it adversarial, let's make it adversarial. Why are you criticizing me and not them?
Because you're not doing it to them. What you're doing is you're forming your own little club over here, and you see, that's the thing, man. You're doing it for entirely signaling purposes. If you really wanted to, intercede what you would do is you would go on their channels and you would make your comments to them. You would be the one commenting on their videos, and you would be challenging them to a debate, not me, who made one comment in your thing, who's mostly a viewer of you, not them. You're the one who invited me here under, I guess, a false assumption. um, and you didn't come at them, you came into your own little club. What you did was make a Ben Shapiro takedown video of your own to signal to your audience, who you are and what you believe in, and that's fine. But you weren't. You're saying, oh, they were being adversarial.
Yeah.
But you didn't interject yourself to them. You didn't rise to their challenge and take them down. Instead, you just sort of came over here and said, hey, aren't these guys bad? These guys are bad. They're bad. Do you agree with me? They're bad, right, guys?
I kind of
fuck.
Well, I kind of did. I made a video that was like, I think, trending at the top of YouTube for a while. So when people searched that, they would get that video.
But that wasn't the video I was commenting on.
The reject modern, the video that I made.
Was that the one that was trending on the top of YouTube?
The one that I made.
Yeah, was that the one? I thought the one you made that was trending on YouTube was the actors, Hollywood actors one.
Well, that was a while back, but I'm talking about recently. Like, if you put in reject modernity, embrace masculinity, my video was one of the top ones to show up for a while.
I mean, it came out like 4 days ago.
Yeah.
Wow, good job. Congrats.
I mean, it's better than just like leaving a comment, like kind of like going back to what you were saying about sort of like what can we do to like make the most impact. If I just went and left a comment in those communities, that's not really going to do that much because those communities seem like they're already sort of like saturated. But if I put that video out there and a kid who kind of like, oh, what's this reject modernity thing? And they go looking for it, and then he sees my piece before the others, he might have a different or more nuanced perspective going into it. Like, again, if my view was that, hey, I want those other videos taken down, I want YouTube to do it, let's delete them, that would be one thing. I would never agree with that. But in this case, it's like, hey, so if a kid comes in and sees these, now you have differing perspectives.
Sure, and like I said in the comment, that's fine. And I don't really have a problem with you doing different perspectives. Although I don't think personally that that's really why you were doing it. Because if you did, you would be you would be making a video about this sort of positive masculinity the way you see it.
Well,
you didn't
I did.
do that.
I did.
You made a video about bad men make bad videos.
One of the concepts of healthy masculinity, as I said before, is trying to protect other men and lift other men up.
But you're not protecting anyone in your opinion piece, right? That's not what you're doing.
Well,
you're presenting your own opinion about it.
Well, yeah,
and you're just sort of saying, this is what this is, and this is my opinion. But in your opinion, you necessarily have to have a target,
Well, yeah, but if a guy logs on and say like, hey, what are these videos about? And then he sees some of those videos and then he sees my video, he might have a fighting chance of not falling into sort of like a more toxic viewpoint. Whereas in my video,
on this issue, you're taking the point of view of people who, like video games cause violence.
Well, no. Again, we're talking about...
Yes.
Well, no, because we know that video games don't cause violence. We know that negative animosity towards LGBTQ people leads to negative results for LGBTQ people.
Oh, man. Okay.
I know. It's like, these are facts, so it's a little bit hard, but...
yeah, these are facts. Yeah.
No worries. But yeah, I have to commend you. I have to get going, but I have to commend you for coming on. Like, kind of like you mentioned before about like challenge. Like, you would actually be surprised how many people I actually challenge to like come and talk about this. None of them will. So yeah. So I actually appreciate you coming
on. Yeah, I'm glad I could be your dancing mule.
Yeah, you did okay. But so I guess like yeah. So basically, all I'm saying with this is that one of the core tenets I believe of masculinity, again, like I guess like nothing is objective, everything's subjective. I would say true masculinity is about trying to lift your brothers and other men up. So when I see a trend that is going around that is sort of like purposely making it adversarial between men, I felt like my duty as a man would be to step in, or at least throw my hat into the ring to try to say, hey, we shouldn't do that. That's not what the ideal masculinity should be. Again, I guess there are some people out there who think a view of masculinity is like, yeah, we should be able to sort of just, mock others, mock other men, and put other men down, I guess. But I guess that's just a matter of opinion.
Which is what I originally said. But this is just a matter of opinion, primarily. And, that all I'm going to say is that I think if you really wanted to stress what it seems your opinion on what masculinity should be, you should have done like a documentary on Ziz or focused on the positive aspects. I don't really see the value, the need from this kind of argument to, you're saying you don't want to put, your version of masculinity doesn't put other people down, but yet you had to pick a group of people to put down in your video. It seems very contradictory to me.
Just to stop, who began the conflict by originally putting people down?
Well, but they would say society began the conflict by basically pushing all, a feminine viewpoint when they feel like they can't be masculine. That's what they would say.
Which, as I said in the video, if they critique ideas, if they critique people saying stuff like that, like men are all toxic or like kill all white men or some stupid shit like that, I am all for it. If it's just some poor kid who likes to dress in a skirt on TikTok, I don't see how he's representative of that.
What their perspective.
No, I understand what their perspective is. I'm saying it's a stupid perspective.
Like, well, attack ideas. Is that their perspective is that is an outcome of what that social situation is generating. They're criticizing that outcome.
Then attack the people to blame, not the quote-unquote victim in this situation. Why would you attack the victim in this situation and not the people?
When they attack the people to blame, those became SJW cringed videos, which you also said were cringe.
No. You have to watch the video. I said those were fine in the sense that they were attacking ideas. But then they migrated into just making fun of fat people or gay people or trans people. If you wanna make fun of someone saying like all white people are colonizers and all white people are bad, go for it. Hell yeah. I don't care what color of skin the person's saying it is. If you have a critique of saying it's like some like rad femme saying it's like, hey, men who like lift weights are toxic. Like, no, fuck that bitch. Like, you can attack her. But if you then use your malice towards her, rightfully so, to justify making fun of some kid who just like, I don't know, like wants to wear makeup or like wants to wear a skirt, I find that absolutely fucking stupid, non-masculine, and very, very weak.
And I can see that perspective. I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah. I'd say it's the most reasonable, correct perspective. But again, everything's up to opinion.
I don't know. I think part of the problem that I see is that I guess I already explained my concern. My concern is that if you start policing how men are going to behave in aggressive ways, you do often police, I guess, their potential for learning moments. Would be one way of putting it. And I don't know. The videos you used as examples, I could see a lot of dudes watching those and coming to the realization after watching them without seeing your video that, man, this is fucked up. I shouldn't do this. And then that would be useful. So,
maybe they will.
That's
and
fine.
Maybe they will, but hopefully other guys will see my video and sort of like not even have to go through that process, kind of have their wake up moment a little bit earlier.
Yeah, but I don't think that's as effective. I think they have to kind of go through that process. I think
I don't really think
processes are important.
I think there are plenty of guys who like don't go around making fun of gay kids and turn out just fine. I don't think most guys have to necessitate going through that process. But
I would probably disagree about that percentage personally. I think
I'm saying because it's not necessary in every case that it's not necessary, period. Like we just don't have to do that shit. It doesn't have to come at the cost of gay kids getting made fun of.
It's going to happen, so we have to kind of like learn where that line is. And I'm not saying you or I know where that line is, and that's
what I'm saying. Try to mitigate it.
But you're kind of coming at it from this sort of squeaky clean, perfect version, it seems, where you want things to be. And and I don't buy that that's possible. So I don't think you should work. I don't think you should work from the presumption of the impossible. I think you should work from the presumption of the possible.
We should always shoot for the impossible by taking possible steps.
I would say don't shoot for the impossible because you can cause a lot of harm shooting for the impossible.
No, we can.
Yes,
If
you
we're
can.
shooting for a world where just like dudes aren't made fun of for like wearing a skirt or something, and we
Yes,
do so by possible solutions, by like, hey, if a guy's making fun of a kid in a skirt and I go over, it's like, hey bro, like that's cringe, you shouldn't make fun of him for wearing a skirt. I don't really see that there's all that much harm in that.
yeah, but that wasn't kind of where I was going with that. I mean, if you're talking about, because another way of making another way to apply that kind of logic are things like speech codes and you know restricting what people can say in legal ways. That's another way of going out.
Okay, yeah, and we can have a debate about that, but in this case, I'm just calling them cringe, which they are.
In your opinion, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, in my opinion, I guess. Um, cool. Well, I gotta get going. My girlfriend's gonna be pissed at me. Thank you for coming on. Maybe we'll talk again sometime.
Sure thing.
All right, thank you so much, man. Have a good one.
You too.
I have to run, y'all. Thank you very much for joining. Elden Ring comes out later the week. We will be streaming on the channel, and